Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 1995 GMC Jimmy. Up front is a 4.3 liter V6, and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Jimmy because it's been a couple of years since I have driven one. I drove a Sonoma last year, and I've driven the S10s and vehicles like that. But to me, there's just something so warm and inviting about these vehicles. I'm excited to share that with you today. But if you would like to share your vehicle with me and have a video just like this one filmed of your own car, you can head on over to my website, zackpreto.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form, takes under a minute to fill out, and that can be found in the description below. But let's get back to that 4.3 liter Vortec 4300 under the hood. Well, this chassis of vehicle, mainly the Blazer and the Jimmy, only ever came with the 4.3 liter. The S10 could be found with a smaller 4-banger, but this only got the V6, and I like it. It makes a good solid amount of power. The 4300 is a very reliable engine, and so you can't really go wrong with it. Like I said, paired to it is a 4-speed automatic known as the 4L60E, and that one can rather be problematic. However, GM threw it at nearly every single rear-wheel drive vehicle that they were making at the time. And 4L60E is personally responsible for keeping many a junkyards in business, because when the trans goes out, oftentimes people will junk the entire vehicle. However, they're not expensive, they're easy to find, and if you do have transmission problems, every fix is known. It's just gonna take a little bit of elbow grease. Last but not least, this particular Jimmy is 4-wheel drive, and we'll talk about how to select that later on, but you could find vehicles of this chassis in 2-wheel drive if that's something that you prefer. So how does it feel to drive a GMC Jimmy? Well, it's very comfortable. The suspension is rather forgiving on these harsh Illinois roads. The 4.3 liter has enough up and go to get you where you want to be, and overall, it's actually a really nice experience. The visibility is pretty good, although this vehicle is tinted. Standard visibility is great. You know, it does ride a little bit harder than other SUVs, or at least modern SUVs that we're used to here today, but I wouldn't consider that a downside. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have a bunch of gauges, which GM is known for. Off to the left, I have my coolant temperature and oil pressure. Then we have our speedometer and tachometer in the center. And off to the right, we have our fuel and battery voltage. The steering wheel doesn't actually have any forward-facing buttons, which I kind of like. It's kind of a nice, clean, simple design, although it does still have that pillowy airbag we've come to know and love from the late 90s. Off to the left, we have a climate control vent, our light switches, along with interior light switches, rear defog, and our rear hatch release. Moving on to the door, we have our power mirrors, power locks, and power windows. Pretty standard equipment here, but I do like how big and chunky the buttons are. Then I get this nice little fabric on the door card as well. Moving into the center, this is where you'll find your 4-wheel drive settings. So I do have 4 high and 4 low, along with 2 high. Very easy, simple, but this is sort of the early days of the push-button 4-wheel drive systems. Then we have 2 climate control vents, an aftermarket radio to the left, and our climate controls to the right. Again, very simple. There's a lot of text going on here, but the actual controls are very, very simple, and I like them a lot. Then we do have a cigarette lighter and ashtray, and moving down to the center console, we have this giant cubby, some coin holders, and our cup holders. So we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the 1995 GMC Jimmy SLE, and I am very happy to report that it does, in fact, pass. The GMC Sonoma is the only other vehicle oldest to pass the big friggin' bottle test. So 1995 is still the oldest year that has passed the big friggin' bottle test, and that title is now shared with not only the Sonoma, but the GMC Jimmy. Then we have some cassette holders and our center console, and then we'll talk about the seats. The seats have the same fabric as what's found on the door card, which I actually really like. To me, these feel very homey, very comfortable, very relaxing, and very nostalgic. And so when I get into a vehicle like this, I sink right into the seats, and it just, it feels like home. And we'll talk more about that later on in the video, but I think the seats are the biggest calling card to that feeling that I'm currently experiencing. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so we're in the back of the 1995 GMC Jimmy SLE, And a couple of things to note. First of all, I do have push-out ashtrays in the door. A little late for that, I feel like, in the mid-90s, but that's okay. The seats are less comfortable than the ones up front, for sure. They're a little bit harder. When you sit down into them, they're a little bit less forgiving, but that's okay. I get these lights that I can utilize, grab handles. Sitting, the floor is actually really high up, so you're sort of in more of a squatting dragon pose than a regular seating pose, but that's okay. Crouching tiger, I meant. But knees aren't hitting the seat in front of me. Head isn't hitting the ceiling. It's just, it feels like I'm sitting on a squatty potty rather than in a GMC Jimmy. So let's hop out. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space. Then we'll talk about the looks. Then we'll talk about my final thoughts, which might be a little bit lengthy, just a heads up. All right, so we're on the back of the GMC Jimmy. We do have this big push button right here, and you can open up the rear glass. This is one of my favorite features in any SUV. I just recently drove an 05 Escalade that did this, and I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Then we reach in here, and we can pull this tailgate down. So I always forget that these actually have tailgates and not, or I guess not up tailgates, but down tailgates like a truck. Very, very interesting. Once we are back here, tons of cargo space. Another thing I always forget is how much gosh darn cargo space the GMC Jimmy actually has, which I love. Some tie downs, things like that, but really just overall fantastic space in the back of a Jimmy. You really wouldn't need a pickup truck if you put those two seats down. You can probably fit most things you need to in the back, but here it is anyway. You'll love to see it. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I like the GMC Jimmy. I don't think it's like outwardly like super amazingly pretty. I don't think it's ugly either. This is definitely the more rounded, cute, bubbly generation of the Jimmy. The previous gen was very square body, so that is something to note, but overall I like the look of it. I think the black on black does pretty well for what it is, and I like it. However, with all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving a 1995 GMC Jimmy? Well, this isn't my first time ever driving a Jimmy. I also drove a Diamond Edition way back in the day, actually funny enough from the same owner. And I wanted to note that William has owned several of these GMC Jimmys, Sonomas, S10s, Blazers, pretty much almost any configuration of this vehicle that was sold, William has owned it. And I want that to feed into my final talking point because, like I said with the seats and when I got in here, I feel very comfortable in these vehicles. I feel very nostalgic and warm and welcome. And I think that is in due part to the interior. The interior space is very welcoming and there's no harsh edges, a little blobby, big plasticky, the buttons are big, and the seats are very, very comfortable. I fit in here very well, which isn't always an assured thing when being a bigger guy like me. But I think the other reason is that there's nothing really sharp about these trucks at all. If you put your foot into it, the engine isn't gonna shock you and twist your spine. I mean, even like putting the windows down, it's nice and gradual. It doesn't shriek, it doesn't shock, it doesn't cry. The GMC Jimmy is the automotive equivalent of Jell-O. It's not really fazed by the outside world. And now, coming up on 27, 28 years later, yeah, 28 years later, it's still just unfazed by new technology. It's not trying to be something it's not. You know what this is? The GMC Jimmy is like that one friend that no matter how long you go between hangouts or dinners or events, you just ease right into it. I grew up with a kid named Andrew, who is one of my best friends, but I only see him once a year, maybe twice a year. And when I do, it's never, oh my God, tell me everything that's happened in your life. Tell me what's up. Oh my, what's going on? Sure, we do that for like a quarter second, but as soon as we're together again, it's like, hey, let's go to Wendy's. Let's go to Los Burritos Tapatios. Let's go get some food, hang out. Let's go down to the arcade, go to Speedway like we used to do. It's like no time has passed at all. And I really, really cherish our friendship. That's how I feel about these trucks. I haven't driven one in years, and yet now being back behind the wheel, it's like nothing changed. It's good to be back, Jimmy. It's good to be back. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to William for letting me take out his GMC Jimmy. He's been a huge asset to the channel over many, many years, and I am very appreciative of him. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.